The education system was not set up for different neurotypes. It
No.
was set up for a neurotypical population in a predominantly neurotypical society. The knock-on effect in an adult's life is that they become traumatized as children. Trying hard to function and fit into a neurotypical system is traumatizing. Many adults have very low self-esteem, very poor opinions of their own abilities, and may feel that things aren't for them, that they're not capable. So it really has a huge impact on somebody's mental health and well-being, the fact that they're trying hard to struggle within a system that's not built for them.
Hello and welcome to our fourth episode of the Learning Collab, brought to you by Panda Education and Training, where we collaborate with industry experts and experienced practitioners to bring you hints, tips and advice from the world of post-16 education. Today we're discussing a topic that's becoming increasingly relevant in education, especially post-16, ADHD in adults. Now, you might already associate ADHD, that's attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, with school-age children. But what about the learners and colleagues you're working with now? The reality is ADHD doesn't disappear in adulthood, and many people have to navigate the challenges in their everyday lives.
And here's why this matters for educators such as tutors, trainers and assessors. By understanding how ADHD presents in adults, you can help your learners or your colleagues understand and unlock their potential, rather than being held back by frustrations or challenges they might not even fully understand themselves. We'll explore how to spot signs of ADHD, what to do if someone suspects they have it, and how educators like you can better support neurodivergent learners.
So I'm Rose Prothero from Panda, here with my Panda partner, Rachel Arnold. And today we're really pleased to be joined by Dr. Esther Barrett from Barrett Coaching and Training. Now, we've been working with you, Esther, for many years, but in a different guise, because, some of you may remember Esther from her many years working at JISC as a digital guru, it says here, Esther. But Esther, you've now found a new path in life after a diagnosis, I believe 4 years ago, of ADHD. So welcome to the podcast, Esther.
Thank you very much. It's lovely to be here. It's lovely to see you both again.
Good. So Esther, look, can you talk us through that journey from being that digital guru and that job role you had to now being an ADHD coach? How did that happen?
Yeah, so interesting. And I love the way you're calling me a guru, because I never signed up to be a guru. I think I did it for such a long time that it just kind of naturally became kind of guru status. So digital learning, yeah, I was really happy in that job. I loved it. I never thought I would leave JISC. I thought I was going to, retire from there. But actually, when I got diagnosed with ADHD at the age of 53, and I started, doing the research as you do, digging deep, going down some rabbit holes, I found on some forums that people were talking about ADHD coaching. And I thought to myself, spontaneously and impulsively, I would like to be an ADHD coach, little knowing that it would end up being my career probably for the rest of my career now. So I trained as, a regular coach, a traditional coach with the ILM level 5 qualification. And then I found that I was coaching more and more people, particularly ADHD, but of wider neurodivergent people as well. And there was no training in the UK. So I thought, well, who better? I don't say that. Why not write some training? Let's write some training. I've been in education for 25 years. I know how to do training. I know how to do coaching. So I started training coaches a couple of years ago now as well. I had the UK's first accredited coach training course for ADHD. And I was very proud of that. And there are a few more now in the UK. So it's lovely that the profession is growing and that more and more people are becoming ADHD coaches. And of course, it grew so much I had to leave my job in JISC, which was pretty sad because I loved my colleagues. But I have a whole new bunch of colleagues now as well. So it's not like I've lost colleagues. It's just I've gained some more and still talk to some of them to this day. So it was definitely the right thing to do.
Excellent. So Esther, can you maybe please start by explaining what is ADHD and how does it present in adults?
It's such a big question. What we always say is if you've met one person with ADHD, you've met one person with ADHD. So it's kind of hard to generalize, especially bearing in mind that a lot of people may have more than one neurotype going on. The first thing to say about ADHD is it's a terrible name and doesn't really describe what it is. Attention deficit sometimes, but attention hyperfocus other times. So it's not really a deficit. It's more of a kind of interest-based nervous system is what we're calling it. Hyperactivity, yes, but not always. Hyperactivity could be outward, could be inward.
Yeah, not always physical either, is it? Could be in the brain.
Absolutely, absolutely. And then the whole disorder thing, well, what we're trying to do is use more neuroaffirming language. So we're trying to talk about ADHD, autism, dyslexia, dyscalculia, dyspraxia, Tourette, and probably I've missed one there, as being neurotypes. So instead of being judgmental about it and saying things are disordered, what we're saying is that neurodiversity includes many neurotypes. And some of those people have the type which is typical, and some of us have the type which is not typical. And so ADHD falls into that category. And another thing to note as well is that seemingly what we're finding is that most people have more than one condition. So I have, or neurotype, you could say, I have ADHD, probably autism, and definitely dyscalculia. And lots of people are finding that there's more than one thing going on. So that's really interesting as well. So we could say like our neurotypes. ADHD in particular then. So what we think of as being impulsivity, yes, that's for sure, could be impulsive in all sorts of different ways in our life. The attention deficit, as it's called, it's like an inability to focus on things we're not interested in, but a heck of an ability to focus on things we are interested in. But that comes along with some organizational issues around, executive function, can struggle with things like time, organizing, scheduling, task initiation, and that can lead to a lot of stress and anxiety. So the third thing to remember is to divide them into three areas. We've got focus, the attention thing. We've got function, executive function stuff. And thirdly, and equally as important, feelings. So people can really struggle with emotional dysregulation and rejection sensitivity dysphoria. And so if you're going to think about ADHD, those are the three things to really remember about it: focus, function, and feelings, and struggles within those three areas. I think you said, how does it present in adults? And actually it presents in adults the same in a way as it does with children, except that an adult has usually learned to mask their true selves, find strategies to manage it. It doesn't go away in adulthood. The traits of ADHD can really come and go. A lot of women find that their traits really exacerbated at really important times of their life, and big changes, hormonal changes, menopause and so on, but also big life changes like maybe university, starting a family, those kinds of things. So it presents in adults the same as children, in as much as if you've met one adult with ADHD, you've met one adult with ADHD, but there are some themes. Yeah, there are some themes.
I think the difference is as well, when you're a child, you're almost like a caged animal in a classroom. So when you're an adult, maybe you choose a job where you're up and about and you can do your own thing. And so your focus and your need to do different things, maybe you can do that as an adult. But when you're a child and you're caged in a classroom, your hyperactivity part of you is either daydreaming out the window, fiddling about with a pen, or maybe not being able to sit still. So again, that maybe that's why it's seen differently in children and adults, maybe.
I think so. The education system was not set up for different neurotypes. It was set up for a neurotypical population in a predominantly neurotypical society. So of course our neurodivergent kids are going to struggle. And the knock-on effect in an adult's life is that they become traumatized as children, not only through education, obviously lots of other things as well, but trying hard to function and fit into a neurotypical system is traumatizing. So the ramifications through the childhood and into adulthood is that many, many adults have very low self-esteem, very poor opinions of their own abilities, and may feel that things aren't for them, that they're not capable, or that they will never reach any kind of potential. So it really has a huge impact on somebody's mental health and well-being, the fact that they're trying hard to struggle within a system that's not built for them.
I'm thinking specifically of the workplace. I mean, what sort of challenges could adults sort of experience, do you think, at the workplace?
So many. Imagine your working day. You have to have a diary, and that can be difficult. Scheduling can be difficult. Prioritizing what's more important can be difficult. Turning up on time can even be difficult. Getting out of bed to go to work, and then arranging meetings, being able to do tasks during the day that are boring, uninteresting, procrastinating around those, feeling bad, beating yourself up. Bosses then coming in and saying you're not doing this well, or offering some kind of perceived criticism. All of those kind of things will cycle. The distraction will cycle, the difficulties with functioning will cycle, and then the feelings will also cycle. So the person can become very distressed in the workplace because they feel like they're not performing. They may be being told they're not performing, and they're just going to feel worse and worse about themselves. So there are absolutely ways that you can manage really well in the workplace, and lots of people do really well in the workplace, but it is about having the right support, having the right strategies in place to be able to reach your potential in the workplace, I think, because there are so many ways in which it can kind of go wrong for you.
Yeah, I think it's about finding out what your strengths are and working to those, isn't it, as an adult. If you can't sit and do a desk-based job and you really feel that that's not for you, then maybe looking for something else if you suspect you have ADHD. I mean, for myself, when I started as an MVQ assessor 25 years ago, I thought I'd found the perfect job because I was working with multiple different learners every day. I was quite organised with my paperwork and doing all that, but I was out and about, driving about to see people, working with lots of different people. And I know that sort of really stimulated me in finding out where my niche was, which sort of leads me on to my next point is that I've done lots of research myself around ADHD over the last, well, for a long time really, but particularly over the last 4 or 5 years. When my son asked me, Mum, do you think you've got ADHD? And I was like, oh, I don't think so. But then looking into it even more, because I've always felt like I'm an introverted person. So I Googled introverted ADHD, and actually all this stuff came back about inattentiveness, all the RSD. So you have to remind me what that stands for.
Action sensitivity dysphoria.
That one. I can relate to lots of different points in my life. So things like I've suffered with insomnia all my life. I've never been able to sleep because my brain literally won't switch off. I've always had multiple voices chatting away in my head. I actually went to do a degree in psychology because I thought I had personality disorder. And I know sometimes people with ADHD can get misdiagnosed with personality disorder. Anyway, so doing all this study in my degree, and we did study ADHD, but back in the 90s, it was very based around the sort of bouncy people in the classroom who are disruptive, and that wasn't me. I was always quite good at school, even though I was probably a bit of a daydreamer. But yeah, and it's all these things started to resonate with me, really. So it wasn't until I started studying neurodiversity in more detail over the past few years that, like I said, I've identified so many traits. Particularly my working memory has always been really bad. I'm constantly using my wonderful iWatch for finding where my phone is because I've lost it. Always losing my keys, my glasses. It's a daily occurrence. It's just something that happens in my house that everyone's used to now. My husband has always called me Arthur because I do half a job, because I'll start something and then I'll go on to something else and then I'll go on to something else. And there's about 12 half-completed jobs around the house. And I didn't realise that was a thing. And then he actually went on an ADHD course in work, and he came back and he's like, you are so ADHD. It's just unbelievable. Then having that awareness now, I'm meeting more and more people who have the same traits and can identify in a similar way. And I was
Hello.
Yes. And it's also helped me identify actually that I personally think Roz is ADHD with very similar traits.
Everything you're saying, I'm going, well, I do that.
Yes.
Yep, I do that.
And we smiled earlier when we talked about procrastination. Oh. So we've got procrastination Prothero sitting next to us.
It's my middle name.
Yeah.
But the thing is, though, right? I mean, and we talked about this last week because I said to Rachel, I mean, come on, do you really think I've got ADHD? Or am I, you don't really think I've got ADHD? She went, oh my God, of course you do. And that took me aback a little bit because I think, well, it's just me, being badly organised. And I am a massive procrastinator. I leave things to the last minute. I am also half a job. Hello. As my partner calls me second gear because it's so slow at doing stuff. But I just thought that was just me, is that really ADHD? That's one thing.
Yeah.
It is just you. But I think people with ADHD often say, when other people are talking about it or identify traits in them, they always say things like, I'm generalizing, everyone does that, don't they? And it's easy to go through 30, 40, 50 years of your life thinking that everybody else does that, when actually you are a different neurotype, and you just assume that everybody's thinking the same way as you. And I always say, if it walks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, it's probably a duck.
And I think it also helps that we sort of understand each other in that way, because we understand how each other ticks in a way.
People with ADHD, when they get diagnosed or identify or discover, which is the best word of all, that they have ADHD, is usually find that nearly all their friends and family also are neurodivergent. Those are the people we get on with, and those are the people who get us, and we get them, and we are comfortable in each other's company because there's a lot less masking. So actually, if you do kind of almost say, okay, I accept that I have this neurotype, everything else sort of falls into place. It does for a lot of people anyway.
I think it's also, we're in our work also trying to find ways to help ourselves. So you find like the Pomodoro technique helps you with your focus,
completely.
don't you?
Yeah, I do need help with focus. And the Pomodoro technique, for those that don't know, it's basically you work for 25 minutes, you've got a timer. You work for 25 minutes, 5-minute break. 25 minutes, 5-minute break. I think you do that 4 times, and then you have a longer break. If I don't do that, if I've got a deadline, and if I don't do that, I am just wandering all over the place. I literally am, something shiny, and I'm gone. I'm finding it hard. Maybe I'm in denial.
Not everybody wants a diagnosis or a discovery or a perceived stigmatizing label. Not everybody wants that, and not everybody needs it either. I think it's useful to understand ADHD and understand if you're a particular neurotype or a combination of neurotypes. I think it's useful to understand that, because then the biggest thing is being hard on yourself. We're all kind of smiling and stuff, and we're laughing about kind of some of the issues that we have, but actually, it can be very, very distressing to be waiting until the very last minute before we complete a task. It's huge. So I'm not diminishing your thoughts about ADHD at all. But what I'm saying is, if people do suspect that they have this neurotype, then understanding it and understanding how to strategize for it, and understanding why they're constantly beating themselves up, which is nearly everybody I've ever met, is constantly thinking they're not good enough, thinking they're too loud, thinking that they're, they're never going to get anywhere in life, because they've been told all these things all the way through their childhoods, that they're never going to amount to anything, basically. And they believe it. And it's absolutely not true. And I know we're going to come on to strengths in a moment, but knowing you're not broken, and knowing that you have a neurotype, and knowing that you never were going to fit into school or family or society, is so helpful in terms of people's mental health and well-being. So for that reason alone, it can be lovely for people to get a diagnosis. Diagnosis then, would you recommend that? Or is it just not for everyone? It's a really good question. Lots of people ask me that question. And I would say, diagnosis can have an amazing impact on people for the reasons I've just mentioned. But some people may say to themselves, but I know I'm ADHD. I know it. I don't need a bloke with a PhD to tell me. But that's the thing. What benefits can come from it? If you do get a diagnosis. There's a couple of main benefits. The one benefit is that you are then, if you've got an official diagnosis, you're eligible for medication. So medication is life-changing for a lot of people. There may be people watching this thinking, I would not take meds, especially not stimulants. Basically, amphetamines is the stimulant version of ADHD meds. But they are life-changing for a lot of people. What happens with methylphenidate, which is an amphetamine, a neurotypical person would take amphetamines and be like, woo, and be up all night partying, right? A person with ADHD will take methylphenidate, amphetamine, and be able to focus on reading a book or notice the colors in the sky. I'm speaking from experience, and be able to listen to a conversation and participate in it without being constantly pulled away and distracted the whole time by their neural networks, which are not functioning in the neurotypical way. So that's the first benefit. If meds is a route that a person wants to go down, it can be incredibly helpful. Not everybody wants to do that. And secondly, the big reason that I just mentioned, if you understand it, you can mitigate, you can manage, you can be in touch with other people in the ADHD community, you can find out what works for people, you can try things out. But if you're a person who goes, okay, that's just me, and that's fine too, but it might be just a bit more of a struggle. It might be a bit more of a struggle in terms of well-being, because if you genuinely do not want to be considered to be in a neuro minority, you might be struggling your whole life to kind of fit in and perform like everybody else does, which can be very, very stressful. So I think medication possibly, and less stress would be two good reasons.
I was with someone last week, actually, and we spent a very long time together. We hadn't known each other for very long. I spent a long time together on a train, and then a bit more time then together in a city that we went to. ADHD. Oh, I explained what I just explained to you. She said, oh, I think I am too. And then we had a discussion about it. And for her, diagnosis is something that she would like to get, because all her life she's never felt enough, and she's felt a lot of blame for not being able to do things that other people find it easy to do. So yeah, I think it's personal choice, isn't it? Whereas I'm almost happy doing all my research, knowing pretty much 99% I probably am, and it does explain my whole life up until now. So yeah, I think it is obviously personal choice, and it can benefit some people and not so much others.
I want to interrupt you for a second, and I'm so sorry to do that, but you use the word blame, but I tell you another word that people feel a lot of is shame. And there is so much shame around neurodivergent people and their experiences of life. It's the biggest word you could possibly use to describe what's going on with people. Shame about not being able to do things other people can do. Shame about thinking in a different way. Shame about, not succeeding in a way that is expected of them by society or by their families or by themselves. So I think shame is probably the biggest emotion to take into account when we're working with people with ADHD, and how easily that shame can kick in. So if you're teaching, for example, it's very, very easy to criticize somebody and make them feel shame, absolutely not intentionally, but the shame can kick in really, really quickly and really early. Sorry, I just wanted to mention that because you said blame.
That was great. Thank you. Yeah.
I mean, what I was going to say is we know each other really, really well. We've known each other for years. But should you bring it up? Should you bring up ADHD? If you think, somebody or somebody you've met has, maybe you've recognized in them some of the things we've mentioned today, should you bring it up?
Good question. I get asked this a lot. Yeah, it's a really good question. So if it was somebody who I didn't know, I would definitely not bring it up. I wouldn't just kind of a random stranger see some signs, because we do kind of relate to other people with ADHD. We do kind of have this kind of unspoken subconscious connection. And when you look at late diagnosed people, often their best friends and people they spend the most time with and work best with are also neurodivergent. But I wouldn't bring it up with somebody I didn't know. I certainly wouldn't bring it out of the blue to anyone. What I might do if I knew someone quite well, a bit like the person on the train, you got to know them really quite well, they had mentioned it first, and then you were able to have a bit more of a conversation about it. So I think that it's very much a kind of a matter of tact and diplomacy. I did know somebody for a really long time, about 6 months, who eventually I did just mention it. Why don't they have a little look at it? But that's because I knew them really well. I trusted them. They trusted me, and I felt able to bring it up with relevance into the conversation. But other than that, I wouldn't want to, tell somebody, I think I have ADHD. It could do more harm than good.
Yeah. I suppose for most of our listeners being tutors, trainers or assessors, so to not bring it up with their learners, but in the spirit of universal design for learning principles, where we deliver training and assessment for all, there's things that we can do with all learners to help them, regardless of whether they've got ADHD or not. So I think it's important to think about, how we can help them with managing their time, how we can help them with managing their workload, being more organized, helping them with tips and tricks and tools that we may use in our own lives that we can then pass on to others. Like when we teach the Pomodoro technique to people.
Time management techniques for everyone, not just, your ADHD. So you need time management. It's for everyone,
That's absolutely right. You don't need to tell someone you can see their ADHD traits, even if you can see them. Just act accordingly, If someone's struggling with time or struggling with getting their work in on time and those kinds of things, don't just assume that they're neurotypical and they're going to be able to do things the same as everyone else. Ask them questions. They don't have to be ADHD specific questions. They could be, do you find it difficult to get started with a task? Or are you finding it difficult to schedule time into your calendar to get tasks done? I mean, if the person picked up on it, they might realize that you were asking kind of ADHD influenced questions, but they probably wouldn't. I just want to say it's not an excuse for things. It's a reason for things. And I think that, it's very difficult in in this particular period of time that we're in, where people talk about labels and bandwagons and, you know, excuses and things like that. Nobody wants ADHD. It's not easy to live with. You wouldn't choose it if you had a choice, but it also is not an excuse. It's a reason. So let's work around, you know, how can we make things better for that person? What can we put in place? What accommodations can we make? You know, it's counted as a disability. So we're legally obliged to make accommodations for people with ADHD. I think that if you think that somebody's trying to make an excuse, that's actually more shame piled onto more shame. So I think it's important to kind of, you know, recognize, understand traits, even if the person doesn't know it themselves, and kind of, you know, universal design, as you mentioned, act accordingly, really.
Well, what about you, Esther? I mean, what is your role as an ADHD coach? What do you do?
That's a lovely question. Thank you for asking it. I trained as a traditional coach, but when I started to coach my clients, I realized that we needed to we needed to adapt traditional coaching to work with neurodivergent people. So traditional coaching is all about the questioning, listening, and reflection, and all about bringing it out of them. They know it's in there somewhere. We just got to bring it out of them. That doesn't work for neurodivergent people generally. So yeah, lots of questioning, lots of listening, but also some guidance, try this strategy with a lot of exploration beforehand, and helping them to kind of try out new ways of doing things that might work for them to help them manage what's going on in their brain and their life. So there are two kind of parallel strands to my coaching. The first one is around strategies. So say your client comes to coaching with issues with organization. Okay, that's half of the course. So let's think about some strategies that you can try to be able to help you manage the things that work for you and the things that don't work for you. But at the same time, my other strand of my parallel process is, what are you saying to yourself? And more often than not, probably 80% of the time, my client is telling themselves that they're never going to be able to do this. So even if they're trying a new strategy, their self-belief, their inner critic is probably saying this is not going to work. So we work on strategizing, but we also at the same time work on, what are you saying to yourself and how can we change it? How can we reframe it? How can we turn your inner critic into your inner coach? Because they may have a few sessions of coaching, 6, 10, 20, but at the end of the day, they're going to go and live their lives after the coaching. So how can we reframe, change, create new kind of self-beliefs that are going to be helpful to them rather than a massive barrier and a massive problem going through their lives? It helps people be less stressed.
Yeah, I think reframing is really important, isn't it? I think if you reframe your thoughts knowing you have ADHD, it makes a huge difference, and you can forgive yourself for
self-forgiveness.
Being like an idiot for 40, nearly 50 years, you know,
self-compassion, self-kindness, self-love, self-appreciation, all the things that people with ADHD tend to struggle with. Self-care. So I bring all of these things into my coaching, and it's not therapy. We're not digging in. We're not trying to unpick the past. We're taking where they are now and moving them forward with self-care and self-compassion.
Yeah.
And practicalities.
Yeah, talking about that, actually, one thing I've realized, because I've always absolutely hated my own sort of paperwork, and I literally have a block where I cannot open a letter sometimes, and I'll just have piles of unopened letters. So recently I've realized, this is because I've got ADHD. It's not just me being lazy and ignorant of my mail. So I've actually got someone to come and open my mail and go through it and put it in piles.
That's lovely.
It feels just so much better to do it that way, and I'm not beating myself up all the time, because I think the thing is, because those envelopes means there's something to do inside them, and I don't want to do whatever's inside the envelope. So I hate having post. I hate seeing post come through the door, and literally I will make piles, and then I've now got a folder with all my stuff in, and then my person comes over and we sit down and we do it together. So yeah, things like that.
It's strategy.
Brilliant little story. I mean, that's a brilliant, we talk about creative problem solving. We have very creative brains. Sometimes we need a coach to kind of just help us uncover what's going on there, what isn't going to work, what is going to work. But what a great solution, and that might work for a while, and maybe another solution will come later on, a few years down the line or whatever, if that's no longer working for you. But being creative and understanding, okay, what's the problem? I hate envelopes. Okay, right. Let's get rid of the envelopes. How are we going to get rid of the envelopes? Someone else can take the envelopes. I'm impressed.
I think the other thing that we do as well, we didn't realize it was a thing until we spoke to you recently, is body doubling, is it called?
Yeah.
So we have worked together on Teams since lockdown, really, but we will sometimes not say anything, but we will both be on Teams, and other people find it really odd.
It's not odd at all. Literally the opposite of odd. Accountability can be incredibly helpful. And in fact, there are apps being created all over the place for people with ADHD in particular, because body doubling does a couple of things. It gives you some time in your schedule where you want to do a task that you know you're going to struggle with, but also the other person has got a task that they're going to struggle with too. So the two of you make an agreement between you that at this time on this day, you're going to do this task. So now you've created some accountability, because you say to the person, this is what I'm going to do for the next hour. And they say to you, this is what I'm going to do. And at the end of the hour, you know that you're going to have to say to that person that you have done that task. So the accountability is so helpful. And a lot of people with ADHD talk about body doubling as being, something that if they know they've got a job to do they know they're going to struggle with, and it's going to be a last minute thing, and it's going to be very, very stressful, bring in some body doubling sessions. Or it could be around routine paperwork, for example. Or if you had a pile of envelopes and you knew you had to open them, so you got body with someone else and they would open their envelopes at the same time. Neither of you know what's in those envelopes, but it doesn't matter. It's an excellent way of doing things. And I very often suggest that if people are struggling with kind of procrastination or task initiation, particularly in their work life, but also at home as well. A lot of people body double housework, for example. There are some apps out there where someone on the app, there is a recording of them making the bed, and people make the bed with the person on the app making the bed or doing the washing up or whatever it is. So yeah, it's a great one to bring up there.
Brilliant. And do you have any other advice for trainers and assessors to enable them to support their learners who they think may have ADHD?
There is a lot of advice, far more advice than you could talk about in the time that it takes to do a podcast. And you probably know, if anyone's watching, you may know that we're doing some short courses with Panda over the coming months. So yes, there are a lot of tips and techniques and tools that you can use to support your learner, or your colleagues in fact as well, and anybody else in your life. What I would say, of course, and I'll say it again, I've said it before, if when you've met one person with ADHD, you've met one person, they may have other neurotypes going on at the same time. But there are some really good things that you can do to support them. And the very first thing that you would do is ask them what they need. Ask them what they need. Don't make any assumptions about what a neurodivergent person needs, especially if you're not neurodivergent yourself, because those two things don't always work across people. So ask them what they need, really explore that as well. Almost don't take the first thing they say. Exploration is so important. Lots of questions. They may not know what they need. So some advice and guidance and signposting, some really good reputable resources. A lot of people get their information from TikTok, and it's not all wrong, but it's not all right either. So, there's some ways of being able to get some information and some suggestions from reputable sources. And, really be okay with it not working. If you try something and it doesn't work, let's move on. Let's try something different, because the person is likely to think it's not going to work. And then if it doesn't work, they're going to feel like they've set themselves up for failure or been set up for failure worse. And just that non-judgment, if you're working with somebody with ADHD, no judgment. If there's perceived criticism or perceived kind of, judgment in terms of, or emotions or negative emotions coming through, like, oh, I'm fed up with you, nothing works for you, and so on, that will can really hit them hard. So using really neuroaffirming words, really kind of neutral words, perhaps neuroaffirming at best, saying, okay, let's have a think about the way that you work, and what's going to be the best for you. And you can say this about the whole of education, of course you can. What's best for you, learner? The world's your oyster, really. But it is about asking the questions and not judging. Be curious, not judgmental.
Lovely. It's great advice.
That's really good advice. I like that. And going off at tangents, probably, as we like to do. But as you said, actually, we are hosting some workshops, aren't we, coming up for tutors, trainers and assessors on ADHD in adults with your good self. And you'll be looking specifically about how educators can support their learners using useful tools and techniques. So check out our website for more details on that.
We're doing on general neurodiversity as well, and neurodivergence.
Yes, which is excellent. And I believe our March workshop has already sold out. So that's good news. And, I just think it's one of those things at the moment, it's being mentioned a lot, isn't it? In the media. And I just think people are really curious to find out how they can support. So fantastic.
If you're a teacher or a trainer or you work with other humans, a sixth of those people will be neurodivergent. Lots of those will have ADHD. So it's not like you can go through your career without working with anyone without ADHD or who's neurodivergent. It's impossible. Those people will be there in your classrooms.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
Well, thank you ever so much, Esther. It's been really lovely to talk to you today. And just for our listeners, really, if you've got any questions about ADHD, please drop us a line on our social media platforms and we can ask Esther to answer those for you. In our next podcast, we are going to be speaking with Paul Evans, Director of the Inspiring Skills Excellence in Wales project, and Rosie Boddy, who's a former apprentice and competitor at World Skills, about skills competitions and why they're good to enter, why they're good for raising standards in apprenticeships and vocational education, and how you can get involved. So we hope to see you back for that one. And thanks again, Esther.
Thanks, Esther.